Mental health and psychological safety. Psychological safety is a long, fancy way of saying self confidence, and it's situational. I have a high degree of self confidence and psychological safety recording these videos, and pretty much zero when it comes to playing video games because I'm not really good at video games and I haven't spent a lot of time playing video games. And if you're one of the people who has an easy time with video games, I kind of envy you. So, how do you build psychological safety? Well, and where are all the contexts and what triggered this idea? So, the reason that I put this together, and this is going to be a little bit longer video than I normally do, there were multiple different inputs that I saw over the last week that I realized that each one of those underneath root cause of whatever the problem was a lack of psychological safety, i.e. a lack of self-confidence, where by many perspectives there should have been more. And this was school settings with people that are high school students, and also workplace settings with people who are wanting to get promoted. They're wanting to move ahead in their careers and they're stuck. So building self-confidence is an internal game. We have to do it for ourselves. You don't get to have somebody magically give you self-confidence or psychological safety. People can set up context that'll make it easier for you to build it, but you've got to do the work. It's like learning how to do math or learning how to swim. You have to actually do the work to be able to count and multiply and divide and all that stuff. And you have to do the work to actually become a swimmer. Psychological safety, self-confidence, same mental model. So, what do you got to do? You have to practice things. As I said, I'm comfortable doing videos, but not playing video games because I really don't play video games. Never really got into playing video games, didn't grow up with video games. Psychological safety comes from practicing things, from taking risks, having some failure, learning from the failures, continuing to move forward. If you've played video games, you know that you're going to fail, and you know that you're going to get respawned, and you know that you're going to play more. And the more you learn, the better you move ahead, then you get to rise up to new levels. I've watched my kids do this a lot. And it's the same thing in real life where something you want to be able to do, you figure out what the smallest baby step, what's the level one, and you go about doing it. In the context of school, where oftentimes we see students who are afraid to raise their hand and answer questions, for them, what they need to start doing if they want to get over that fear is they need to start answering questions or asking questions that are simple and easy, and just know that it's okay to do that no matter what, and give themselves kudos. Wow, I had the courage to ask that question. I had the courage to answer a question that somebody else, the teacher or whoever, asked. The easiest place to do this is in small work groups with other students. This minimizes the risk, minimizes the number of people involved, and also recognizing that irrespective of how good your answer is or isn't, you're still a cool person. Like, even if someone heckles you about that, the reality is that heckling speaks more about them than it does about you. Your poor answer, poor question, whatever it is, that's the best you can do right now, and that's okay. You will learn how to do better in the future. That heckler over there may or may not, and that's not your problem. Your problem is building your own self-confidence, your own psychological safety. If you are doing this in a work context, the way that I would approach it, and the way that I did approach it when I was coming up and learning this stuff, was to ask questions in a one-on-one setting. And I don't understand it, or would this work, right? When there's just one other person. And that's pretty easy. And I start off baby steps, one person, ask a question, make a suggestion, depending on the context. And then I kept doing that till that was really, really easy. And then I started doing it in small meetings where there was 2 or 3 of us, maybe 4 of us, and we were working on something together, and I would ask questions or make suggestions. And that transition felt really smooth to me. And then I moved it up to bigger team meetings where it was 8 to 10 people. This was a way that I could be in control of what was going on. I could be in control of the conversation. I could be in control of when I raised my hand, when I asked, all that stuff. Now, full disclosure, I wanted to get better, right? I wanted to push myself forward to advance. I was willing to ask uncomfortable questions or ask them badly, and people go, wait, that doesn't make sense. What are you talking about? Because I knew that the learning and the advancement was very valuable. And also, I realized that in less than 2 weeks, I got comfortable in a context that on day one, I wasn't comfortable. So the building of psychological safety and self-confidence actually happens fairly rapidly. So this is a do it for ourselves kind of a scenario, right? Now, what about the other side? What do you do if you're a teacher or you're a manager or you're a leader or you want to be one of those kinds of roles? Well, good news. Whether you want to be in one of those roles or you have one of those titles, one of those roles, whatever you want to call it, you can help other people to start to baby step their way into psychological safety. I've done this, so I'm speaking from having actually implemented this kind of thing. What you do is you figure out what the baby steps are for the audience, and you figure out how to get them to start to step into something that's a little bit uncomfortable. For me, working with software teams, when I was operating as if I was a leader, even though I wasn't technically a leader of the team, I was just individual contributor, but I noticed there were people who were really shy. I started having informal one-on-ones with them, like literally we just had lunch together. And I would ask them questions to get them to give me answers and suggestions about how to make things work better. I didn't care if they were good, bad, or indifferent. That wasn't the point. The point was to get them comfortable speaking, not to make sure their answers were perfectly correct. And also to get them to ask questions, right? To get them to ask me questions about areas where I had knowledge and they didn't. Like that was what I really wanted to have happen in the one-on-ones. And then we upped the game a bit to being in a small group of maybe 3 or 4 people. Same thing. Get them to answer questions, get them to make suggestions. And then 8 to 10 people, building it up, right? In some context, I've even gone so far with teams to meet with the people on the team that have an easy time speaking, that have an easy time making suggestions, that have an easy time asking questions, and meet with them and get them to volunteer to not talk in our meetings for a period of time, up to 6 months. 100% voluntary on their part. But I explained to them why I was making this request, right? I framed this so they could understand the reason that I was asking them to change their behavior so dramatically to help these other people on the team to improve. And they liked these other people on the team. They wanted them to improve. They wanted them to be comfortable contributing, but they hadn't had the self-awareness and the other awareness to recognize what was happening with these people. And once I explained what was going on, they were 100% all in to help their friends get better. Humans are like that, right? We're very tribal and we want to help other people to get better. And so the outcome of this was these people who had been really quiet because they didn't have their own sense of psychological safety, even though I'd gotten them to be able to speak up in one-on-ones and in small meetings, all of a sudden they had this safe space to speak into with more people involved. And 3 months later, these formerly quiet people had super easy time speaking up anytime. They would just, I think blah, blah, blah. What about blah, blah, blah? And we played out the whole 6 months. And the amount of time that I would wait to give the formerly noisy people, the formerly vocal people, an opportunity to speak got shorter and shorter and shorter because After 3 months, I'd say, what does anybody think? Any suggestions, any questions, whatever. The people who had been the quiet ones that I was trying to help get psychological safety, they were just jumping right in. This was an amazing experience to be able to see two things. Number one, how their self-confidence went up. They became so much more comfortable, so much more confident in all kinds of meetings. Even when we were having executives come in, the whole bit, like, it was fantastic to watch. Number one. Number two, our productivity went up by 40%. And if you've ever worked with a team, especially software engineers, if you can up their throughput by 40%, that's amazing. And it worked. This is how leaders can help their teams build psychological safety. You can also do it as a school teacher. You can get your students in your class to start to do this exact same thing. Start with one-on-one, and then small groups, and then the whole class, right? It's amazing to me when I run into students, and we see students a lot because of the kind of work that we do, who they're very bright. Intellectually, they're in great shape. And yet, because they have this lack of self-confidence, this lack of psychological safety, there's so many contexts where they're afraid to say yes and do some work that would actually be really valuable for them, which in the long run means that when they get to college, they say no to invitations for projects, which has a negative impact. And then they have a hard time when they're at work, when they get out, going around and talking to people and learning how to do the work and getting moved forward and advancing their careers. So starting this when you're in high school is really, really valuable. I mean, you could even start in middle school if you want to go that way. But it's really valuable to have people get these skills to advance their careers. For me, feeling like I had a lot of psychological safety at work when I built that up in the earlier part of my tech career, it enabled me to talk to people, to network, to ask questions, to really get into what was going on, despite the fact that I had social anxiety. As my social anxiety was being nibbled away at and my psychological safety was going up, I was expanding the scope of what I could do at work. This got me promotions that I never asked for. This also got us to build better product because I was designing product and got us happy customers, right? I got to hear about problems from customers because I felt enough self-confidence to reach out to them and say, hey, I hear you ping our support team. What's going on? How can we help you? Right? Having that level of psychological safety is for ourselves, or irrespective of the role, is arguably the best thing we can do for our career. Because even if you have all the skills, if you don't have the psychological safety to speak into something, ask a question, make a suggestion, talk to strangers, whatever it is, you're trapped in your career, because you need to be talking to people to figure out what to do and where to go, and also what kind of problems to solve. As always, if you've got questions, reach out. More than happy to chat. And hope you're having a good day. Thank you.